Welcome to episode 7 of Strategic Recovery with Matt Finch, where we don't just talk about addiction, we decode it, we transcend it, we personalize the path to freedom. This is the podcast where recovery is not a cookie-cutter checklist, it's a soul-level strategy. Last time, in episode 6, we explored the 5 phases of strategic recovery, the natural unfolding of transformation, from the first spark of awareness to full alignment and transcendence. That episode gave us the map, the journey, the what and when of deep recovery. But today's question is different. It's more intimate. It's the question that breaks through the noise and gets to the core of real, sustainable healing. What do I need to heal? Because here's the truth. Healing doesn't begin with advice. It begins with awareness. And that's why today's episode is called The 12 Strategic Recovery Assessments. Build your personalized healing blueprint. Because the difference between feeling stuck and feeling unstoppable is knowing who you really are, biologically, psychologically, emotionally, socially, spiritually. Recovery isn't a one-size-fits-all. It never was. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that's exactly what today's episode is about. We'll go beyond the surface and explore the 12 essential assessments that help you decode your unique healing blueprint, including your brain type and biochemical needs, your emotional style and sensitivity profile, HSPs, empaths, internalizers, externalizers, your trauma patterns, nervous system baseline, and attachment style, your level of recovery capital and what's missing, your spiritual alignment and intuitive compass, your thinking patterns, learning style, and transformation triggers. Because once you know how you're wired, you stop trying to force change and you start flowing with your design. As the great Alan Watts put it, you are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. But to truly change, you must first understand. And understanding requires assessment, the right ones. So in today's episode, we'll walk through each of the 12 assessments, how they work, what they reveal, and how to use them to create a healing strategy that's not only powerful, but personalized. Because when you know your biology, you heal the cravings. When you know your psychology, you stop the self-sabotage. When you know your soul, you awaken your purpose. And when you know all 3, you reclaim your power and never look back. Why this matters? Most people are trying to recover using someone else's blueprint. They're following advice that wasn't made for them. They're trying to squeeze their soul into a system that doesn't fit. They scroll, they search, they stack strategy after strategy. Supplements, therapy, meditation, cold plunges, dopamine detoxes. And when it doesn't work, they blame themselves. But here's the deeper truth. You're not broken, you're just misaligned. You're using someone else's key for a lock that only you were designed to open. That's the root of relapse. Not a lack of effort, not weakness, but mismatch between the method and your makeup. Your trauma history matters. Your nervous system, your sensitivity, your energy type, it all matters. As Hippocrates, the father of medicine, once said, it is more important to know what sort of person has a disease than to know what sort of disease a person has. Recovery is not a one-path process. It's a multidimensional recalibration of biology, psychology, behavior, and belief. So instead of guessing, instead of trying to willpower your way through someone else's plan, let's get strategic. Let's stop using tools that weren't built for your hands and start building your own personal blueprint for healing. That's why in today's episode, I'll introduce you to the 12 Strategic Recovery Assessments. Each one is designed to help you know yourself, trust yourself, and heal yourself on every level. Because when recovery fits you, it works. How I discovered the 12 assessments. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right and still not getting better, there's a reason for that. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you're doomed. It's because you've been treated like a diagnosis, not a whole human. Most recovery systems don't account for your individuality. They focus on behavior, not biology, on abstinence, not alignment, on the addiction, not the person experiencing it. But what if your healing wasn't about trying harder? It was about understanding deeper. That's why I've put together this curation of the 12 strategic recovery assessments to give you the full picture of your inner ecosystem. These assessments draw from neuroscience, how your brain type affects impulse, reward, and motivation, trauma research, how your nervous system responds to stress and safety, depth psychology, how your core archetypes influence healing and sabotage, functional medicine, how nutrient imbalances impact your mood and cravings, spiritual frameworks, how your soul path, purpose, and energy blueprint affect recovery, clinical experience from more than 13 years of coaching, therapy, and holistic addiction work. That's what these assessments are for, not to label you, but to reveal you clearly, compassionately, and strategically. They're not tests to pass. They're lenses of insight, so you can stop the cycle of confusion and finally see what you actually need. So, whether you're just starting out or you've been stuck in the same loop for years, these 12 tools will help you design your own map, not follow someone else's. Let's explore them together. 1. The HSP assessment, highly sensitive person. Do you flinch at sudden noises? Feel overwhelmed in crowds, under fluorescent lights, or during emotional conflict? Ever felt like you were too sensitive for this world? You might be a highly sensitive person, and that's not a disorder. It's a neurological trait, a different kind of operating system, one with amplified sensory and emotional input. This trait was popularized by psychologist Dr. Elaine Aron, who discovered that roughly 15 to 20% of people are born with a nervous system that processes information more deeply and intensely. HSPs tend to notice everything: subtleties in tone, texture, energy, temperature, and even tension. As Dr. Aron explains, highly sensitive people see the world through a different lens. Their nervous systems are more finely tuned, so they are more easily overwhelmed, but also more empathetic, perceptive, and creative. And in her book, The Highly Sensitive Person, she adds, "It is not a matter of being more emotional. It's a matter of being more affected by emotional and sensory input. That's a strength when understood, and a source of suffering when ignored." What this means for recovery. Many HSPs spend their lives in constant sensory overload without knowing it. Their nervous systems are in a near perpetual state of hypervigilance, scanning, absorbing, reacting. Here's what that often looks like: getting emotionally flooded during conflict, needing more alone time than others, being thrown off by loud noises, strong smells, chaotic environments, crying for no reason, or feeling unable to cope with modern pace and pressure, struggling in relationships with people who lack empathy or emotional intelligence. So, what do many HSPs do to cope? They self-medicate, often with central nervous system depressants like alcohol, benzodiazepines like Xanax or Ativan, opiates, THC, or cannabis concentrates. These substances aren't just recreational. They're used to dampen the noise, slow down the overwhelm, and create an artificial sense of nervous system relief. But over time, that relief creates a trap, dependence. Understanding your HSP wiring reframes the entire addiction story. It reveals that your use may have been a form of nervous system regulation, not weakness or irresponsibility. What you need now. If you score high on the HSP scale, it's essential to build calm, low-stimulation environments, prioritize nervous system regulation like breathwork, somatic therapy, yoga nidra, or TRE, set firm boundaries with overstimulating people or situations, avoid fast-paced, chaotic recovery environments, that overwhelm rather than support? Recognize your sensitivity as a strength, a form of depth, empathy, and attunement that can guide your healing journey. Next step, listen to episode 5 and explore the empath and seeker recovery archetypes. They often overlap with the HSP profile and offer tools for reclaiming your sensitivity as a superpower, not a sentence. 2. The empath test. Do you absorb the moods of people around you? Feel drained after crowded environments or intense conversations? Even if they weren't about you? Do you find it hard to tell where your emotions end and someone else's begin? If so, you may be an empath, someone with high emotional attunement, not just sensitivity. Unlike HSPs, who respond strongly to sensory and emotional input, empaths go further. They take on that energy, often feeling it as their own. Psychiatrist and author Dr. Judith Orloff, who pioneered the study of empaths in clinical psychology, writes, "Empaths are emotional sponges. They absorb other people's energy into their own bodies, which can be deeply healing or deeply overwhelming." The Empath's Survival Guide. What this means for recovery. Being an empath dramatically shapes your experience of addiction and healing, because when you feel other people's pain, anxiety, or trauma, you don't just understand it, you carry it. And if you don't have the tools to release it, you'll often turn to substances or behaviors to quiet the chaos, or even if it wasn't yours to begin with. Here's how this commonly plays out. As a child, you absorbed your parents' emotions and learned to regulate them instead of your own. You become the emotional caretaker in your family, friendships, or romantic relationships. You struggle to say no because you feel guilty or responsible for others' feelings. Substances become a way to block the noise, numb the emotional overload, or give yourself space you couldn't get otherwise. Empaths are often misdiagnosed with anxiety disorders, depression, or even bipolar, when the real issue is energetic entanglement without proper boundaries. As Dr. Orloff says, until empaths learn to protect their energy, they'll remain vulnerable to emotional burnout, compassion fatigue, and self-abandonment. Empaths in recovery. This assessment is vital because if you're an empath, traditional recovery approaches often miss the mark. Tough love, confrontation-based groups, or environments with poor emotional safety can feel more harmful than helpful. You don't need more pressure, you need more protection, and practices that empower your intuition without draining your soul. What you need now. If you score high as an empath, focus your healing around energetic boundaries, not just physical or time-based ones. Grounding practices that bring you back to yourself, salt baths, body scans, breath work, time, and nature. Learning to differentiate between your emotions and those you've absorbed. Trauma-informed therapy that honors emotional attunement as a strength, not a liability. Avoiding relationships, groups, or healers that pressure you into codependency or emotional labor. Next step. Dive into episode 5, where we explore the empath archetype in detail. You'll find not only validation, but a roadmap for reclaiming your emotional gifts without losing yourself. Number 3, the brain type test. How your brain is wired, chemically and functionally, deeply affects how you respond to stress, cravings, routines, and healing. The brain type test draws from the work of Dr. Daniel Amen and his use of SPECT brain imaging to identify unique patterns of activity in the brain that shape personality, mood, and addictive tendencies. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You can change it and your life by understanding how it works. Dr. Daniel Amen. Change your brain, change your life. Dr. Amen's research has revealed that not all brains function the same. In fact, he identifies 7 major brain types, each with distinct strengths, vulnerabilities, and treatment needs. For strategic recovery, we've simplified this into 4 core patterns that most influence addiction recovery. The anxious brain. This brain type shows heightened activity in the basal ganglia and amygdala, leading to chronic worry, fear, and tension. Common traits are overthinking worst-case scenarios, trouble sleeping, using substances to calm down or escape anxiety. Healing strategies for this brain type are GABA support, like magnesium, L-theanine, and mindfulness, nervous system regulation, such as vagus nerve activation and breath work, and safe environments and predictable routines. The overfocused brain. This pattern involves increased activity in the anterior cingulate gyrus, often causing rigid thinking, obsessiveness, or perfectionism. Common traits are difficulty letting go of thoughts, getting stuck on problems, using substances to shut off mental looping or internal pressure. Healing strategies are 5-HTP or serotonin support, as advised by a practitioner, flexible routines, CBT, and reframing, not just resisting, negative thought spirals. The impulsive brain. Here, low activity in the prefrontal cortex leads to difficulty with impulse control, follow-through, and planning. Common traits: acting before thinking, trouble with consistency, substance use linked to thrill-seeking, boredom, or low dopamine. Healing strategies: dopamine precursors, tyrosine, exercise, cold therapy, accountability partners or systems, and visual tracking, short-term goals, and neuro-reward strategies. And the balanced brain. This pattern shows more regulated activity across regions, often the result of healing work, supportive environments, and optimized habits. Common traits: able to self-regulate emotions, more consistent in thought and action, substances often less appealing or needed. Healing strategy: maintenance and mastery, refining what works. Focus on purpose, service, and deep fulfillment. Strategic challenges to keep growth alive. Why this test matters. You wouldn't give the same workout plan to someone with joint pain and someone training for a triathlon. So why use a one-size-fits-all recovery plan? Your brain chemistry and dominant pattern affect everything from what supplements actually help you, whether medication calms or frustrates you, how long it takes to feel stable, whether group work or solo routines will be more effective. Dr. Amen often says, when your brain works right, you work right. When your brain is troubled, you are much more likely to have trouble in your life. By understanding your brain type, you can stop blaming your willpower and start rebalancing your brain. What you need now. If you haven't taken this assessment, visit getstrategicrecovery.com to take the brain type quiz and then explore brain type specific supplement stacks, personalized strategies for motivation and emotional control, recovery routines tailored to your neurological strengths and needs, and listen to episode 8, where we dive deep into the biochemical root of addiction and how to nourish your brain back to wholeness. 4. Mood type test. Your mood is not random, it's biochemical. The mood type test helps you identify which neurotransmitter systems are out of balance: dopamine, serotonin, GABA, or endorphins. Each one plays a critical role in how you feel, what you crave, and how you heal. Most people in addiction recovery are walking around with depleted brain chemistry, but they don't know which system is low, so they try everything, hoping something will work. This test changes that. It gives you clarity, language, and a personalized plan for rebalancing your mood at the biochemical root. The human body heals itself, but it needs the right raw materials and conditions to do so. Julia Ross, The Mood Cure. Dopamine deficiency: you might feel low motivation, fatigue or boredom, lack of pleasure, cravings for sugar, caffeine, or stimulating substances. Addiction pattern. You may have relied on substances for drive, focus, or reward, especially stimulants, thrill-seeking, or achievement-based behaviors. What helps? Amino acids, L-tyrosine, DLPA, cold showers and strength training, tracking wins, setting goals, healthy rewards. Serotonin deficiency. You might feel depression or low mood, worry, sadness, or emotional sensitivity, sleep issues or PMS, cravings for carbs, alcohol, or comfort food. Addiction pattern. You may have used substances to feel okay, numb sadness, or avoid spiraling emotions. What helps? Amino acids, 5-HTP, and tryptophan, with caution and guidance, sunlight, rhythmic exercise, and breathwork, gratitude, journaling, time in nature, and laughter. GABA deficiency. You might feel anxiety, tension, or tightness in the chest, racing thoughts or overwhelm, easily overstimulated or reactive. Addiction pattern. You may have used substances to slow down your brain, relax socially, or sleep. What helps? Amino acids, L-theanine, GABA, liposomal or pharma-GABA, magnesium, yoga, somatic shaking, guided meditations, cutting caffeine, increasing safety signals to the nervous system. An endorphin deficiency. You might feel emotional pain, grief, or a sense of inner emptiness, oversensitivity to criticism or rejection, trouble with letting go of attachments. Addiction pattern. You may have used substances to feel love, warmth, or connection, especially opiates, porn, food, or intense relationships. What helps? Amino acids, DLPA, D-phenylalanine, gentle touch, emotional expression, heart coherence practices, music, dance, and meaningful relationships. Why this test matters. Mood issues aren't just emotional, they're biochemical feedback loops. If you don't address neurotransmitter imbalances, you'll struggle with cravings. Even if you're doing everything right, meditation may feel impossible. Relapse risk stays high because your brain isn't fully online. This test helps you get specific, so your recovery isn't based on trial and error. Cravings aren't a moral failure, they're a chemical signal. What you need now. Take the mood type test at getstrategicrecovery.com to find out what you're low in and how to start replenishing it safely. Then explore mood-boosting supplement protocols, customized emotional practices for your neurotransmitter type, how to balance brain chemistry without meds or with them if needed. Be sure to listen to Episode 8, The Biochemical Root of Addiction, where we go deep into this topic and offer a full healing roadmap. 5. High sensation seeking assessment. Some people don't just cope with life, they chase it. If you've ever felt bored by normal, addicted to adrenaline, or prone to risky behavior, you might be a high sensation seeker, HSS. And that's not a disorder, it's a trait. But if you don't understand it, it can lead to chaos, addiction, and self-sabotage. The high sensation seeking assessment helps you identify whether you're wired for intensity, and more importantly, how to channel that energy into growth instead of destruction. The cure for boredom is curiosity. There is no cure for curiosity. Dorothy Parker. Signs of a high sensation seeker. You get restless without new challenges or stimulation. You're drawn to adventure, speed, risk, or novelty. You've dabbled in extreme sports, psychedelic journeys, or intense careers. You feel alive during crises or peak experiences. Routine feels like death. You need motion, momentum, mystery. In addiction, this often shows up as binge behaviors, substances, sex, gambling, food, chasing emotional highs or conflict for stimulation, burning bridges just to feel something, feeling stuck in the valley between highs, and reaching for something to spark you back to life. Why it matters in recovery. Most recovery models don't account for sensation seekers. They emphasize stability, stillness, and slow growth, which can feel like soul suffocation to someone who craves speed, impact, and expansion. If you don't recognize your HSS wiring, you may mistake stimulation for addiction. You might relapse simply because your life got too quiet. You'll feel ashamed for craving more, when that craving is part of your design. Addiction isn't just about pain. Sometimes it's about a hunger for intensity, a refusal to live a flatlined life. How to heal with HSS wiring. You don't need to shut off your hunger for aliveness. You need to refine it and give it new direction. Redirect the drive toward purpose-driven work and projects that challenge you. Somatic, peak experiences, cold plunges, dance, breathwork, flow sports. Sacred intensity, spiritual practice, creative risk, ecstatic states. Traveling, learning, or teaching at the edges of your comfort zone. Learn to distinguish real aliveness versus fake dopamine hits, true risk versus self-destruction, growth edge versus escapism. When you honor this trait, instead of pathologizing it, recovery becomes exhilarating, not dull. What you need now. Take the high sensation seeking quiz at getstrategicrecovery.com to discover how this trait shows up in your healing. Listen to episode 4, Rewire, and episode 6, The 5 Phases, to see where HSS needs to be channeled in your transformation journey. Consider these practices: high urgency routines with built-in novelty, recovery communities with ambition, action, and spiritual fire, creative rituals that push your edges safely. You're not too much. You're just wired for more. And now you have a way to live that without burning out or breaking down. 6. 4 Tendencies Assessment. How do you respond to expectations? One of the most overlooked keys to success and recovery is understanding your response to structure, rules, and accountability, both internal and external. The 4 Tendencies, developed by best-selling author Gretchen Rubin, is a simple but profound framework that reveals how you're wired to respond to expectations. Self-knowledge is the key to self-mastery. When you know how you respond to expectations, you can design your life in a way that works. Gretchen Rubin. The 4 tendencies are: 1. Upholders. I do what others expect of me and what I expect of myself. Thrive with rules, plans, and self-discipline. Can overdo it or become rigid, perfectionistic, often successful in recovery programs that are clear and structured. 2. Obligers. I meet outer expectations but struggle with inner ones. Great at showing up for others but fall short for themselves. Need external accountability, groups, coaches, check-ins to succeed. At risk of relapse if recovery is too isolated or unstructured. 3. Questioners. I'll meet expectations if they make sense to me. Driven by logic, research, and purpose. Need to deeply understand why recovery methods work. May resist programs that feel dogmatic or illogical. And 4. Rebels. I resist all expectations, even my own. Fiercely independent, creative, and nonconformist. Don't respond well to rigid rules, authority, or being told what to do. Need personalized, values-based motivation and autonomy. Why this matters in recovery. Recovery isn't just about what you do. It's about how you're motivated to do it. You could have the best tools, protocols, and strategies, but if the method doesn't match your inner operating system, you'll resist, self-sabotage, or burn out. Knowing your tendency helps you choose the right kind of support, group versus solo, coach versus peer, rigid versus flexible. Understand your resistance patterns, create momentum with less effort and more alignment. You don't lack willpower. You lack a structure that honors your motivational blueprint. Real recovery application examples. A rebel may relapse if forced into a rigid 12-step model, but thrive in a self-directed coaching journey. An obliger might do well in group programs with weekly check-ins, but flounder in isolation. A questioner might waste months researching everything unless they find a science-backed plan they trust. An upholder can create their own plan and stick to it, but may benefit from flexibility and emotional support. What you need now. Take the 4 Tendencies quiz at getstrategicrecovery.com to identify your motivational style. Listen to Episode 5, Archetypes, and Episode 7, Assessments, to dive deeper into self-awareness as a recovery superpower. Try this. If you're an obliger, set up regular accountability check-ins. If you're a rebel, write your own recovery manifesto that reflects your values. If you're a questioner, read the research on your chosen path. And if you're an upholder, build out a strategic calendar with checkpoints and rituals. This isn't just about putting yourself in a box. It's about understanding your internal compass, so your recovery plan actually works for you. 7. Recovery capital scale. How much support do you really have, inside and out? In the world of addiction recovery, recovery capital is one of the most powerful predictors of success, yet most people have never heard of it. Recovery capital refers to the total resources a person has to initiate and sustain recovery. This includes both internal and external strengths, from mental health and coping skills to finances, housing, and supportive relationships. The more recovery capital a person has, the better their chances of sustained recovery. Dr. William Cloud and Dr. Robert Granfield, originators of the term. The 4 domains of recovery capital. 1. Personal capital. Physical health, emotional resilience, self-esteem, mental clarity, spiritual connection. Example: I'm sleeping well, managing stress, and feel motivated. 2. Social capital. Positive relationships, community support, mentors, non-using friends. Example: I have people I can call when I'm struggling and they support my growth. 3. Community capital. Access to services, recovery-friendly environments, employment, housing, healthcare. Example: I live in a stable place and can access therapy or group support. 4. Cultural capital. Belonging to a recovery supportive culture, spiritual groups, cultural identity, values. Example: I feel connected to a group or belief system that reinforces healing. Why this matters in recovery. You can have the strongest willpower in the world, but if you're surrounded by toxic relationships, unstable housing, no income, and untreated trauma, the odds are stacked against you. People don't relapse because they're weak. They relapse because their environment and resources don't support sustained change. Understanding your recovery capital lets you identify hidden strengths. You may be more prepared than you think. Pinpoint key deficits so you can focus your energy wisely. Create a personalized support strategy instead of a generic plan. Take the assessment. You can take the recovery capital scale as a formal assessment or as a journaling prompt. Reflect on these areas. Do I have emotional regulation tools I trust? Do I have anyone I can call when I'm in a low state? Do I feel financially and physically safe? Do I belong to a community that reinforces healing and purpose? Then rate each domain on a 1 to 10 scale. This gives you a recovery heat map of where you're strong and where you need to build. Real recovery insights. Someone might be spiritually awakened, high personal capital, but have no friends who support their sobriety, low social capital. Or they may have a strong family, high social capital, but struggle with anxiety and self-worth, low personal capital. Others might feel lost in their environment, low community capital, and not realize that online coaching or digital support could fill that gap. There's no shame in having a low capital, but there is power in naming it so you can change it. What you need now. Download the Recovery Capital Inventory Worksheet to map your current strengths and deficits. Listen to Episode 6, 5 Phases, and Episode 1, New Recovery Paradigm, to understand how capital builds across time. Action step. Circle the one domain you feel is most depleted right now and brainstorm 3 simple ways to strengthen it this week. Recovery isn't just about what you stop doing. It's about what you build around you and within you. And that's what Recovery Capital is all about. Number 8, 6 Human Needs Assessment. What truly drives your decisions, emotions, and behaviors? The 6 Human Needs, developed by Tony Robbins and rooted in humanistic psychology, reveal the deep emotional motivators that guide every choice we make, including our addictions, our recovery paths, and even our relapses. When these needs go unmet in healthy ways, we find unhealthy ways to meet them, including substance use, codependency, control, or avoidance. All behavior is driven by the need to meet one or more of the 6 human needs, and addiction is no exception. Tony Robbins. The core 6 needs. 1. Certainty. The need for safety, stability, predictability, and comfort. Example, drinking to relax after a stressful day or using to self-soothe. 2. Variety, or uncertainty. The need for novelty, excitement, change, and stimulation. Example, partying, thrill-seeking, or bouncing between emotional highs and lows. 3. Significance. The need to feel important, unique, wanted, or worthy. Example, using to feel powerful, rebellious, or special. 4. Love and connection. The need to feel close, accepted, and bonded with others. Example, using in social groups or fearing rejection if sober. 5. Growth. The need to evolve emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. Example, pursuing recovery to discover purpose, meaning, or personal expansion. And 6. Contribution. The need to give beyond oneself, to serve, help, or impact others. Example, becoming a coach, mentor, or role model post-recovery. Why this assessment matters in recovery. Everyone prioritizes these needs differently, but the top 2 needs you chase, often unconsciously, shape your entire life. If your top needs are significance and variety, you may be driven by ego and chaos, but if they're growth and contribution, you're likely to feel fulfilled and aligned. Chloe Madonis, Strategic Intervention Coach. Addiction often arises when you seek certainty in a chaotic life via routine substance use, you crave significance but feel unseen or powerless, you want love but use substances to feel accepted, you lack growth and fall into cycles of stagnation and despair. How to use this in recovery? Take the 6 Human Needs quiz, available at getstrategicrecovery.com, or reflect on this. Which 2 of these needs have driven my life the most, and how has addiction helped me meet them? Then ask, are these needs being met in healthy or unhealthy ways? What new behaviors could meet these needs more sustainably? Example recovery profiles. The significance seeker might need praise, attention, or success to feel worthy, and relapse when feeling invisible. The variety chaser may get bored easily with routine and needs stimulating, passion-driven recovery tools like breathwork, martial arts, or adventure therapy. The growth-oriented finds healing through books, courses, reflection, and self-discovery, but must be aware of over-intellectualizing without embodiment. What you need now. Listen to Episode 5, the 4 archetypes, to explore how these needs interact with your personality type. Episode 7, You're Here, to integrate your needs into your personalized blueprint. And action step, pick one healthy way this week to meet your top human need, without substances, people-pleasing, or numbing. You don't just need a recovery plan. You need a motivation map, one that reflects what your soul is truly chasing. The 6 human needs give you that map. 9. Dharma Archetype Assessment. What were you born to do, and how does your recovery help reveal it? In Sanskrit, Dharma means sacred purpose, the unique way your soul is designed to serve the world, express itself, and experience meaning. It's not just a job, it's your true calling. The Dharma archetype system, popularized by Sahara Rose and rooted in Vedic philosophy, outlines core spiritual roles that show up in everyday culture, from ancient yogis to modern changemakers. And when we're disconnected from purpose, we often seek meaning through substances, chaos, or numbing. But when we align with our Dharma, healing accelerates. When you live in your Dharma, you are in flow. When you resist it, you suffer. Sahara Rose. The 5 primary Dharma archetypes. 1. The teacher. Gift. Communication, guidance, knowledge. Shadows. Preachiness, dogma, imposter syndrome. Recovery role. Shares their story. Becomes a coach, mentor, or educator. Number 2. The healer. Gift. Empathy, emotional intelligence, transformation. Shadows. Burnout, martyrdom, over-identification with pain. Recovery role. Energy work, therapy, body work, herbalism, deep service. Number 3. The visionary. Gift. Innovation, leadership, long-term thinking. Shadows. Disconnection, idealism, lack of groundedness. Recovery role. Founders, activists, reformers, paradigm changers. 4. The creator artist. Gift. Expression, beauty, storytelling, inspiration. Shadows, perfectionism, escapism, self-doubt. Recovery role. Music, writing, design, performance, sacred creativity. And 5. The entrepreneur, warrior builder. Gift, discipline, action, results, impact. Shadows, overworking, control, self-worth tied to success. Recovery role, launching conscious businesses, structuring movements. Why this assessment matters in recovery. When addiction takes center stage, purpose gets buried. But purpose is the flame that makes sobriety worth keeping. Knowing your Dharma archetype helps you reconnect to meaning beyond survival, choose aligned work and service, heal your identity from addict to servant of the light. Work is love made visible. Khalil Gibran. When you know why you're here, you stop drifting, and recovery becomes not just about what you're leaving behind, but what you're rising into. How to discover your archetype. Reflect on questions like, what comes naturally to me, even when I doubt it? What brings me into a state of flow? When I was a child, what did I pretend to be? What do others come to me for again and again? You can take the free Dharma Archetype quiz at getstrategicrecovery.com. Recommended episodes and tools. Listen to episode 6, the 5 phases of strategic recovery, especially phase 5, transcendence. Action step. Choose one way this week to embody your archetype, even for 10 minutes. If you're a creator, paint. If you're a teacher, explain what you've learned. Don't wait until you're healed to live your purpose, because in truth, living your purpose is part of how you heal. 10. Holmes Ray Life Stress Inventory. Feeling overwhelmed? You might not be broken, just biologically overloaded. In 1967, psychiatrists Thomas Holmes and Richard Ray created the Holmes-Ray Stress Scale, a revolutionary tool that measures your risk of illness and emotional breakdown based on the amount of stress you're currently under, whether you recognize it or not. Each major life event, from divorce to job loss to relocation, carries a measurable weight on your nervous system. Accumulate enough points and your risk of physical and mental collapse increases dramatically. The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. William James. But here's the problem in recovery. Many people think they're failing when they relapse, when in fact they're exceeding their body's stress threshold. How the test works. Each life event has a numerical value. Examples include death of a loved one, 100 points, divorce, 73 points, job change, 36 points, holiday season, 12 points, minor law violation, 11 points. A score over 150 equals mild risk. Over 300 equals high risk of illness or relapse in the near future. Even positive events like getting married or starting school add stress to your system. It's not about good or bad. It's about load. Why this matters in recovery. If your stress score is high, it explains why you're tired no matter how much you rest. You feel emotionally fragile or reactive. You're reaching for substances, behaviors, or dopamine to cope. This doesn't mean you're weak. It means your nervous system is maxed out. Your body keeps the score. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And if you don't honor that, your body will pull the emergency brake eventually. What to do if your score is high? 1. Acknowledge your stress load. Stop pretending you're fine. 2. Simplify your life. Cut unnecessary commitments and create buffers. 3. Prioritize sleep, hydration, and nutrition. 4. Use grounding tools daily. Breathwork, nature, Epsom salt baths, etc. 5. Get extra support. This is when therapists, coaches, and community matter most. You wouldn't expect a broken leg to run a marathon, so don't expect an overwhelmed nervous system to perform like it's thriving. Take the Holmes-Ray assessment. You can take a free version at getstrategicrecovery.com. Recommended episodes and resources. Episode 2, Why Most People Stay Stuck in Addiction. Episode 3, The 5 Pillars of Strategic Recovery, especially the environmental and psychological pillars. Episode 6, The 5 Phases of Strategic Recovery. Focus on Phase 2, Detox, plus Phase 3, Repair. Your next step. After taking the test, circle your top 3 stressors and ask, can I reduce this? Can I get more support around this? Can I change how I relate to this? And remember, the goal isn't to remove all stress. It's to support your system so it can carry what matters most, your healing. Number 11, low hormones self-test. Exhausted, moody, foggy, not yourself? It might not be in your head. It might be in your hormones. One of the most overlooked obstacles to recovery is hormonal depletion. Years of substance use, chronic stress, poor sleep, trauma, and even overtraining can tank your endocrine system, especially your adrenal, thyroid, and sex hormones. And when those systems are out of whack, it affects everything. Your energy levels, your mood stability, your motivation and drive, your capacity to regulate emotions or focus, even your ability to feel pleasure and purpose. Hormones are the messengers that tell your body how to think, feel, and respond. When they're out of balance, so is everything else. Dr. Sarah Gottfried. Symptoms of hormonal imbalance. Use this self-test to reflect. If you check 5 or more, you may benefit from lab testing or targeted support. Chronic fatigue, no matter how much you sleep. Brain fog or difficulty focusing. Irritability or mood swings. Low sex drive or erectile dysfunction. Loss of muscle tone or increased belly fat, irregular menstrual cycles for women, anxiety, depression, or emotional volatility, poor stress tolerance, cravings for salt, sugar, or caffeine, feeling flat like you've lost your spark. Common hormones affected in recovery. 1. Cortisol regulates energy, stress, and sleep. Chronic stress leads to dysregulation. 2. DHEA, a precursor to sex hormones and mood regulation, often low post-withdrawal. 3. Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, influence energy, sex drive, mood, and motivation. 4. Thyroid hormones, T3, T4, TSH, control metabolism, energy, mood, and mental clarity. 5. Oxytocin, the bonding and trust hormone, often low in trauma survivors. And 6. Insulin, blood sugar regulation, linked to energy crashes and emotional instability. Why this matters in addiction recovery. When hormones are off, recovery feels 10 times harder than it should. Why? Because you're asking your system to heal without the internal fuel to do it. You cannot talk therapy your way out of a hormonal crash. And sadly, many people get misdiagnosed with treatment-resistant depression or chronic fatigue syndrome when the real root is biochemical depletion. What you can do. 1. Take the low hormones self-test, link in show notes. 2. Get labs done, ideally a full hormone panel, cortisol, DHEA, sex hormones, thyroid, insulin. 3. Support your system naturally, adaptogens like ashwagandha, rhodiola, and holy basil, targeted amino acids and micronutrients, B6, zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, sleep hygiene and circadian rhythm repair, breathwork, cold exposure, and sunlight. And 4, consider bioidentical hormone therapy, BHRT, with a trusted practitioner if needed. Recommended resources: Episode 8, The Biochemical Root of Addiction, and Episode 3, The 5 Pillars of Strategic Recovery, especially the biochemical and spiritual pillars. Final insight: hormones aren't just chemistry, they're the language of your soul, translating your inner world into felt experience. If your system is whispering through exhaustion or mood swings, listen. Balance is not just possible, it's essential for your next level of freedom. And 12, exhausted resource test. Are you still using, not because you're addicted, but because that behavior became your best available resource? The exhausted resource test reframes addiction through a different lens, not as a disease, not as a moral failing, but as an outdated neuroassociation, one that once gave you immense relief, but now drains your energy, sabotages your values, and clouds your potential. The neuroassociation formula. This framework, developed by myself, drawing from NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and NAC, Neuroassociative Conditioning, reveals how your nervous system rewires behaviors to perceived pleasure or pain. Here's the core principle. Addiction is an outdated pleasure-pain equation that needs to be recalibrated, not judged. Every behavior we do repeatedly has a neuroassociation, a link in the nervous system that says, this equals pleasure, do more. This equals pain, avoid it. But when a person links 10 out of 10 pleasure plus benefits to a substance or behavior, 1 out of 10 pain plus consequences, it becomes a powerful coping tool, a resource. When they link 1 out of 10 pleasure plus 10 out of 10 pain, it becomes a problem. But the nervous system may still cling to the old link. And when they link both pleasure and pain at similar levels, that leads to ambiguity, inner conflict, relapse, and the cycle of starting over. Why this assessment matters. Most recovery programs ignore this underlying formula. But if we want sustainable transformation, We must uncover your primary addictive neuroassociations, identify where the behavior still feels like a resource, shift the link from coping tool to costly crutch. This is where recovery becomes personal and powerful. People are not addicted to substances. They are addicted to escaping an identity, emotion, or experience they haven't yet learned to regulate. What the test measures: 1. Current pain-pleasure associations with your addiction. 2. Perceived benefits versus consequences, emotional, social, mental, spiritual. 3. Degree of ambiguity, areas where your nervous system is still in conflict. How to use the exhausted resource test. Reflect honestly on what the behavior gives you, not just what it takes. Score your perceived pleasure, 1 out of 10, and pain, 1 out of 10, linked to that behavior. Explore, what would it take to tip the scale? What would make the pain more real? What new behaviors could meet the same needs with less cost? Suggested podcast episodes. Episode 1, The New Recovery Paradigm. Episode 5, The 4 Archetypes, especially the Achiever and the Thinker. And Episode 6, The 5 Phases, especially Phase 4, Rewire. Final reflection. You're not weak for having used something that worked for a while. The key is to stop calling it your enemy and start recognizing it as an exhausted resource. Because once you understand that, you can build something better. You don't break an addiction. You replace it with something more aligned, more empowered, more alive. Put them together and you get a blueprint. Not a diagnosis, not a label, but a blueprint for liberation, a personalized map of your inner terrain. When you stack the 12 strategic recovery assessments together, you're not just collecting data, you're assembling a mirror, one that reflects who you truly are, biologically, emotionally, spiritually. It's a system that says, this is how I'm wired, this is what I've been through, and this is what I need to heal. Because self-understanding is the soil where recovery takes root. From friction to flow, most people are fighting invisible battles, wrestling with cravings, resistance, and self-sabotage, without realizing they're just misaligned with their own design. But when you understand your sensitivity, your brain type, your core needs, you stop blaming yourself, you stop comparing yourself, and you start building a path that actually fits. When you know yourself, you are empowered. When you accept yourself, you are invincible. Tina Lifford. This is the essence of strategic recovery. Less punishment, more precision. It's not about willpower, it's about wiring. Not about hustle, but harmony. Take the next step. Want to take all 12 assessments and create your own healing map? Go to strategicrecovery.com to take the assessments and get your customized recommendations. This is where strategy meets soul, where science meets self-discovery, and where your recovery becomes truly yours. Coming up next week on the podcast, we'll explore dopamine, pleasure, and the real reason cravings are so strong. Why just say no doesn't work, and how to finally understand and outsmart the urge to escape. Until then, remember, you're not broken, you're waiting to be decoded. And your healing? It's not random, it's written in your design.